For those familiar with me and my journey the last 10 years, you know that this charming little bird is one out of several other species that I've come to know very well, establishing close relationships of many years with several individuals. Such as Hatch, a male red-breasted nuthatch I knew from winter 2014 to the middle of June 2020. The longest I have known one of these birds. Belonging to the genus Sitta, which includes 17 species of true nuthatches of North America and Eurasia, the red-breasted nuthatch make up the common nuthatch family, or Sittidae. They are estimated by Partners in Flight at 20 million, and between 1966 and 2014, their numbers increased throughout their range, as reported by the North American Breeding Bird Survey. Much of their range is in the Boreal, as well as northernmost forest regions, which stretch from Alaska to Newfoundland and Labrador, south through the Appalachians to eastern Tennessee and North Carolina. They are in a great deal of the western coniferous forests as well, where they are found as far south as California and Arizona. In the areas I've listed, they are permanent residents, seen year-round. However, in some years, particularly when cone crops fail, many individuals move southward for the winter in search of food, a cycle that occurs every 2 to 3 years depending. During this time, they can show up in large numbers, visiting feeders and delighting those who don't typically get to see them. Years like that, which was one in 2020, are known as Irruption years. It is thought that many of the birds are younger ones, with most adults remaining on their breeding territories. Red-breasted nuthatches may leave as early as July in those food shortage times. Winter is probably the best season to see this charming bird. Look high up in spruce trees and you'll likely spot them foraging on the cones. Check your suet feeders too, as one may come by for a quick and easy snack. In summer, it's possible to attract them to a nest box, but they aren't as likely to do so as other species like chickadees. If you do choose to install one, make sure to attach a guard to keep predators from getting in and raiding eggs and young. A lot smaller than the widespread white-breasted nuthatch, the red-breasted nuthatch measures around 4 inches in length and weighs close to half an ounce. They have a large head with virtually no neck, a long straight bill, and although they look similar to other nuthatches, the distinct head pattern of red-breasted nuthatches should help you confirm who you are seeing. None of the other ones have those bold black and white stripes. They can also be mistaken for a black-capped chickadee. There are obvious differences, though, as can be seen in this side-by-side image. Although male and female red-breasted nuthatches are mostly grayish-blue in the back, wings, and tail, it is fairly easy to distinguish them from each other. In males, the crown is black. Females have a dark grayish-blue head. And the rusty-colored underparts that give this species its name are paler in the female. With short legs, a short tail, a flat body, and strong long claws, this bird is perfectly equipped for climbing up, down, and around limbs and trunks of trees. Unlike other birds like woodpeckers or creepers, these guys have the advantage of being able to go head first down a tree, thanks to an enlarged hind toe that provides secure footing, and a stubby tail that doesn't get in the way. It is thought that this allows them to find tiny organisms hidden in the bark that they may have missed while going up, or that have been left unnoticed by other birds. More often than not, they are seen climbing around branches rather than trunks. And they do the most adorable thing of hanging upside down as they move along the underside of these limbs in search of food. Something most other birds cannot do. although their copycat, the black and white warbler, likes to try and mimic much of their climbing behavior. During summer, red-breasted nuthatches eat mainly insects and other arthropods, such as beetles, caterpillars, spiders, ants, and earwigs, and they raise their nestlings on these foods. Over fall and winter, they switch to eating more conifer seeds, which are typically cached into the trees earlier in the year. As with blue jays, when hiding these food items, they will take pieces of lichen or other natural material, placing it over them, providing better coverage. One great thing about these birds is that when there is an outbreak of spruce budworm, they come to the rescue, lending a helping hand. This is a good example of the important role they play in their fragile ecosystem. Although not as common to see, it is possible to find them on the ground foraging. I've never been able to make out for sure what they are eating. It could be smaller organisms, seeds, and maybe even grit, which helps aid in digestion. Red-breasted nuthatches also like suet, peanuts, and sunflower seeds, so consider putting hopper, tray, or suet feeders up with these food items if you are looking to attract them. A cute thing about them is that they tend to select the heaviest food item available to them. And if these are too large to eat in one piece, they will stick them into the bark and then hammer them open. This is where the name nuthatch comes from, which is derived from nuthack, a reference to the habit of hacking or pecking open nuts. Thanks to their chisel-like strong bill, red-breasted nuthatches can dig cavities in trees for nesting, which takes place usually in early April to June. A pair bond is formed, helping to keep the male and female together throughout the timing of raising a brood, which for these guys is a very laborious activity, especially in some years when there is a bumper crop of their favorite insects, causing them to have a second brood. The female is the one who chooses a nest site, and construction of it is done by both members of the pair, usually in a decayed tree or stump, though they also use existing holes and occasionally nest in bird boxes, as I mentioned earlier. Deciduous or coniferous trees are used, but mostly I've seen the ones in my area using conifers that have broken tops. The nest height varies from 1.5 to 12 meters, with most being found around 4.5 meters above ground. Occasionally, they may even nest in a tree as high as 36 meters. Excavation can take up to 18 days and produces a cavity around 20 centimeters deep. When it is done, the female then builds a bed of grass, bark strips, and pine needles, and lines it with fur, feathers, fine grasses, or shredded bark. The last stage of nest building is an interesting one. The cavity entrance is always smeared with spruce or pine pitch, brought by both the male and the female in their bills. They may travel a great distance to collect this resin, and it's applied when the female is preparing to lay eggs. Maintenance occurs throughout the nesting period until the young have fledged. There have been occurrences where birds use strips of bark to carry the resin, a great example of tool use. Although it's not for certain why the birds do this, a couple of theories have been presented. One is that it helps to keep insects like ants out of the nest. It could also be that it prevents predators like squirrels from entering. Another theory is that it's related to the habits of other nuthatch species, which use mud to reduce the size of the entrance to their nest cavity. Whatever the case for why they do this, it's an interesting behavior. And it's how I know for sure there's somebody nesting inside. The female lays 4 to 7 eggs, and incubation of the young is done only by her. During this time, the male brings her food. 12 days later, the babies hatch. Males work very hard to bring food to their young, returning to the nest as soon as every 10 minutes. The young are fed in the nest for 2 to 3 weeks before they fledge, and they stay with their parents in a noisy family group for several weeks thereafter. One thing I love about these birds is just how chatty they are. They are one of the chattiest I've ever known. Almost constantly making sounds, especially when in the company of their mate or other nuthatches. The most common call is the territorial yank, which is used to let other males know that this area is occupied, and also used to attract a female. Songs can have 6 or more of these notes each, which can be repeated up to 16 times per minute. Males who haven't found a mate sing this call most. Yank calls are used in different variations to express many meanings, and they also use yank notes as a way of communicating between the pair. When agitated or feeling threatened, they make a similar sounding version, but with repeated yanks one after the other. Often they flicker their wings as they express their annoyance while making this call. Another version of this note made by males is sped into a vibrating trill when near the nest at the end of excavation or beginning of egg laying. One of the calls I really like is their squeaky noises when they are relaxed and wild with their partner. And one last chatty sound I'd like to mention, a favorite of mine, is one females make during the time that they are laying eggs. They're also very moody due to high levels of hormones and will jab their mate. Often mated pairs remain together for several years, occupying and defending their territory year-round. I've noticed that although these birds may remain with one partner for years, should a new male or female come into a territory or even just live nearby, breakups may take place. In the nearly 7 years that I knew Hatch, he had 4 different mates. One of his mates, Maggie, was the only one he ended up back with after a breakup. And in the 3 years I have known Maggie, she has had 3 mates. The relationships of red-breasted nuthatches are so interesting and fickle, it seems. In late summer, like most other passerines, the red-breasted nuthatch molts its feathers. They can look pretty rough for weeks, as old ones shed while new ones grow in. Usually, by late September, the molt is fully complete and they are fresh-looking again.
Hi, Hatch.
There is a behavior of these birds that I've always found so fun.
Maggie?
It typically takes place when they are competing with other birds like chickadees for food. To intimidate their competitor, they may open their wings to appear large and sway back and forth. None of the nuthatches I've known over the years, and I've known at least a dozen, have done this nearly as much as Lima, the latest nuthatch that has come into my circle. The oldest known red-breasted nuthatch was 7 years and 6 months old. My buddy Hatch was at least 7 years old. He may have been older, because I met him in late winter 2014 when he was already an adult. I don't know when he was born. Last year, in June of 2020, he seemed to get ill and passed on. I never saw him again. He touched my life and gave me a unique experience, a sweet bond with a wild red-breasted nuthatch that I will never forget. Fly free, little guy, and thank you for allowing me into your life. What did you like learning about, and have you ever seen one before? Comment below, and as always, thanks so much for watching. Take care. Happy birding.